Okay, this is Tony Phillips again. You might have noticed if you watched the previous video I made when I was talking about this new bookplate edition of At the Ears Core, and I was raving about it and all the cool illustrations in it. I was cut off and I actually had a lot more to say. Plus the other half of the video I was talking about some of my favorite Edgar Rice Burroughs series and Burroughs type series, which I didn't get to mention. So I'm going to do this part of it over again. You just see me rave anymore about that Pellucidar book. You get the point. Okay, so what I'm talking about now is the new novel that I've written. I don't mean the dystopian one. I mean the one called The Eighth Continent, which is a Lost Worlds type story, based on a place something like Pellucidar in Caspak, where we have a ruling race of, species of sentient creature similar to the Mahars, which exist, and also we have wildlife from all over, from every prehistoric age. We have the stock characters of the in this case, he's an autopilot, and we have the Abner Perry type character, and we have the beautiful native princess as well. So we got all those elements, plus some, unlike Pellucidar, pretty much we have some lost civilizations going on here. Also, like Pellucidar, I do, and unlike Lin Carter's Xanthodon series, I do have an equivalent of the Mahars in this particular series. So I'll go ahead. I think there's enough space in there. I just deleted some stuff I didn't need any longer. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about the series I want to emulate as far as not only the type of story, but in their production and how they're presented, so forth, in today's modern world. So let me show you how. Okay, here are a couple editions of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom or Mars series. I have a few more of these. Actually, I realize I haven't quite read every one of them, but there have been other editions. I have some with hardcovers with Frazetta paintings on the cover. This one is A Princess of Mars, the very first Edgar Rice Burroughs Mars book he published under the pseudonym of Norman Bean. This one was Gods of Mars. This was where he's follows the river Ith, the Martian equivalent of the whole heaven or the Holy Land, which turns out to be inhabited by monsters called plant men. I'm sure you all remember that. What's really cool about these is that this particular edition of the series all sported these Michael Whelan wraparound covers. And Michael Whelan is a fantastic artist. If you're familiar with his art, he did a lot of sci-fi work in those sci-fi covers, and also some of the covers of Stephen King's Dark Tower series. I believe the first one and the very last Dark Tower series by Stephen King had illustrations by Michael Whelan. And he also did the cover of an ultra-rare edition of Firestarter, which I just about prohibitively expensive. Okay, so around the time in the 70s and 80s, they came out with other editions of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and also there were authors who imitated Edgar Rice Burroughs. And the next series I'm going to show you is actually kind of my own experience of the Mars books. I mean, the first books I actually read all the way through, and I was really got enthusiastic about sword and planet type stuff, were Lin Carter's Callisto books. And here they are. I remember as a kid going to different used paperback and comic book stores and hunting these up. I'd heard of them, and they were even more fantastic than I assumed them to believe. And they're by Lin Carter. Lin Carter is, he writes, I don't really call them pastiches, because that's not really what they are. They're in a separate world, totally separate characters, civilizations, races, peoples, monsters, and whatnot. But he wrote them intentionally. As an article he wrote in not Savage Sword, but Savage Tales, which was Khazar's black and white companion magazine back in the 70s. How he deliberately patterned his hero, Captain Jonathan Andrew Dark, on John Carter and his world on the planet of Callisto, which is actually one of the worlds of Mars, called moons of Jupiter, which is called Thanator by its inhabitants. Okay, this is actually, it was Black Legion of Callisto that I first read, actually got a hold of and was able to read this, and I was hooked from that point on. The second one is the first one in the series, and I was really blown away by this one. I remember reading this and the others in the 8th and 9th grade, where I could hunt them up and I could escape into this. I mean, escape from horrors I had to face, like wooden shop class and Burns's English class. Okay, I don't want to talk about that. And anyway, here they are. I remember finding Mad Empress of Callisto with a pteranodon in my first trip to the Griffin bookstore in South Bend as a kid. They had used paperback sci-fi and fantasy there. It is really fantastic. Okay, so you see how these were marketed. We have, just like we have Renegades of Mars, did I get that right? The Princess of Mars, Chessmen of Mars, and whatnot. We have Jandar of Callisto, Black Legion of Callisto, Mind Wizards of Callisto, and whatnot. They had a different cover format for the last two books, which I wish they kept with this cover format and this particular artist. I can't think of his name. I remember looking some of his stuff up. There were a couple of covers by Ken Kelly, who I found out rather shocked me that he passed away lately. I remember his work. He's also a fantastic artist. I like some of his, I have some paperbacks of other series that have his paintings on the cover. Okay, so you get the idea. Okay, you get the idea here. Okay, so I remember this one. There's a T-Rex on the cover. Very memorable cover. Inside, it's actually a plesiosaur-like creature, not a Tyrannosaurus. And, well, I talk more about the Mind Wizards and the whole Callisto thing on my blog, which I did a post about that. Lin Carter had a Burroughs-type hoax where he pretended the events in the story were real, and they came to him by these manuscripts written by his hero, Jonathan Andrew Dark. I think if you can read them, you can see all the Burroughs parallels. Lin Carter actually wrote the story, but some people were apparently fooled by that, and they would write to him asking about, where's this portal to another world in Cambodia? Where is it? And he finally gave up, and he just said, well, he would give some fake answer, I guess. So anyway, that's pretty much it for the Callisto books. I would highly recommend them. Lin Carter also wrote famously, at the same time I was reading the Pellucidar books, which were pretty much my first and best Edgar Rice Burroughs series, although at the time I also read Tarzan the Terrible, his one Edgar Rice Burroughs, one original novel set in the lost land of Peladon, which is a lost world in Africa inhabited by dinosaurs and tailed men. Okay, Pellucidar is a much vaster lost world inside the earth with a lot vaster assortment of prehistoric beasts and prehistoric peoples and beings. Okay, the Lin Carter Xanthodon series is a lost world with a hollowed out section underneath the Sahara Desert, and I'm going to get these in order. This is the first one. Journey to the Underground World. I soon moved on to the reads that maybe while I was still, looking up the Callisto books and reading them, and at the same time I was reading the Pellucidar books, I actually read the take on them, Journey to the Underground World, and the other stories set in the lost world of Xanthodon. We have, in Lin Carter's Xanthodon, we have a lost world inhabited by creatures from the various prehistoric eras, plus we have Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals warring against each other, plus lost civilizations like ancient Crete, which Burroughs did not include in Pellucidar. Actually, Mike Grell did include in the Lost World of Skartaris for Warlord. Lost Atlantean civilizations also occur in Marvel's Khazar series. So, and they occur in, at least one or two occur in the Xanthodon series. One thing that's been remarked on Lin Carter's Xanthodon series is he does not have a parallel with the Mahar species. He does have a species of giant leeches that are worshipped by a race called the Gorpaks, which are, at one point he mentions them having a type of intelligence, but it turns out it's more like probably an animal type intelligence for these giant leeches. They aren't really what you call sentient beings. Okay, so they don't really occupy the space of intelligence and dominance in his books that the Mahars do in Edgar Rice Burroughs' Pellucidar series. My own series, as I've said, does include a species of an intelligent equivalent of the Mahars that survived the Mesozoic era. And I toyed around with the idea of surviving intelligent dinosaurs, which actually I might include in a future book, but the dominant species are descended from ammonites, which are a type of mollusk. They are the coiled squid that lived in the prehistoric seas. Ocean reptiles like Tylosaurus fed on those. Okay, they also died out along with the dinosaurs 65 to 70 million years ago. There are maybe one type of ammonite alive today, but otherwise they're all gone. I speculated that they could have developed intelligence, and I've used those as my equivalent of the Mahars. Okay, at the time there were others, not that many Lost Worlds entire series, but there were quite a few Sword and Planet series based on Edgar Rice, copying Edgar Rice Burroughs' Mars series, such as not just Lin Carter's Callisto books, but also his Green Star books, which I read those maybe a little bit later. See, which other ones by Lin Carter? There was also the World's End series, which was kind of based on the Mars series. And he kind of got a little bit of Mars series into his Thongor books, which were basically a Conan pastiche. The elements didn't quite jive. I love the Thongor books, don't misunderstand. Okay, so the Green Star books were kind of like a combination of Beyond the Farthest Star and Edgar Rice Burroughs' Venus series on the planet Venus, known as Amtor to its inhabitants. And because they both took place on forest worlds of huge trees. Okay, so there's a similarity there. And there was a number under the Green Star, by the light of the Green Star. I have them all. I can't recall the exact titles of all of them. There were other series that also paralleled the Edgar Rice Burroughs Mars books and Venus books, including John Norman's Gore series. I did read a couple of Gore books as a teenager. Probably, if you're familiar at all with John Norman's Gore, you understand the controversy with those books. Reading them, basically it was, I won't get into the whole controversy thing, but I will say that Norman's kept sounding like a broken record most of the time. Some good parts, but he kept sounding like a broken record, so I quit reading the Gore books. However, I did go back and read the first 4 to 5 books, which I read later on were actually pretty good. The emphasis was on adventure and interplanetary stuff like the Lin Carter and ERB books, and they are pretty good. And the first one edition of the first 4 to 5 Gore books sport Boris Vallejo covers, and that's pretty cool. Okay, so that's, and also there were other series like the Lee Brackett's Hounds of Skies, and there were other books by Lee Brackett, who I think is a woman. There was one book, series set on a planet called Antares, and there was one called Beasts of Antares. I remember that. The Gore books had Priest Kings of Gore, Raiders of Gore, and whatnot. A whole lot, you can see that this parallels the titles of the books by Edgar Rice Burroughs himself. So Gore, by the way, was about a planetary twin of the Earth that Earth could not know about because it was always on the other side of the sun, and certain civilizations from Earth were taken by aliens and transported to Gore. I think that might have been the work of the Priest Kings, if I'm not right. And then there was the Kerr, who were villains. Anyway. Robert E. Howard also had a famous interplanetary book, but he just managed to write one book. I don't know if he would have written more, called On the World of Amulric. And the hero was named Lin Carter, and there were the wing races and all kinds of weird stuff going on Amulric. It's been speculated that Otis Aldebert Klein might have finished the end of Amulric. There's kind of been some debate about that, but anyway, it's a fantastic book. Otis Aldebert Klein was writing at the same time as Burroughs, and he also intentionally ate Burroughs. I have a blog post on him as well. He wrote 2 Lost World stories. Unlike Lin Carter, Otis Aldebert Klein did have actually 2 Tarzan imitations. Jam in India and Tam, Son of Tiger, and both of them visited lost worlds of prehistoric beasts and civilizations.